Hey, I'm Alex Yaros. This is my new horror story. Hope you enjoy it. Subscribe, like, and let me know what you think in the comments.
The bookstore was nearly invisible, wedged between a pawn shop and a boarded-up cafe. No sign, no name. Just a glass door so dusty it barely reflected light. Jeremy wasn't planning to stop. He was on his way to sell his laptop charger after another unpaid freelance gig. But something about the display window made him pause. There was only one item, a small blue hardcover book without a title. He stepped inside. The bell above the door didn't ring. The air smelled like dried paper and something sweet, like rotting fruit. No one greeted him. The place was dim, shelves leaning, books piled like forgotten thoughts. The blue book was on a pedestal near the back, open to the first page. He didn't remember walking to it, but his fingers were already turning the page. It read, "At exactly 3:12 p.m., the man in the wrinkled gray coat would stumble in front of the number 18 bus on 4th Street. His name was Harold Baines. He never looked up." Jeremy blinked. The prose was strange, too specific, too cold. He checked his phone. 3:08 p.m. Just curiosity, he told himself. Just a coincidence. He left the store with the book still in his hands. He hadn't paid. No one had stopped him. The door clicked shut behind him like a breath held too long. He walked to 4th Street. It wasn't far. He wasn't going to admit to himself that he was checking. But he checked. At 3:12 p.m., a man in a gray coat stepped into the crosswalk. Jeremy froze. The bus came fast. There was a screech of brakes, a thud, a scream. He watched in numb horror as the man crumpled to the ground, his briefcase bouncing once before sliding under a parked car. People ran forward. Someone called for help. Jeremy walked away, the book heavy under his arm. That night, he read the next page. The young man would wake to find a red mark on his wrist, shaped like a spiral. By the end of the week, it would open. He laughed, nervous but amused. Cheap horror writing, probably self-published and dumped. The next morning, the mark was there. Jeremy stared at his wrist in the bathroom mirror. It was faint at first, a pinkish, slightly raised swirl no larger than a coin, like a burn that didn't hurt. He rubbed it. Nothing changed, no pain, no itching, just there. He didn't want to admit the obvious. The book had predicted it, just like the man in the coat, just like the time, just like the bus. He didn't go to work, not that anyone would notice. His phone had no new emails, no missed calls. He checked the book again. The third page was blank. He turned it back and forth, shook it, even sniffed it. Old paper, musty but not moldy. No glue, no electronics, just a regular book. Almost. That night, around midnight, he got a notification on his phone. A message from an unknown number. Page 3 is ready. He didn't know whether to laugh or throw the phone. Instead, he opened the book again. Page 3 had writing now. The spiral would open slowly, like an eye waking from sleep. The boy would try to deny it, but by morning it would bleed, and then it would see. He slammed the book shut. His wrist throbbed all night. By morning, the skin had split, not like a wound, but like something had unfolded. A thin slit, glistening red. A single drop of blood traced the edge. He wore a long-sleeved hoodie, went back to the bookstore, or tried. No shop between them. He checked both sides 5 times. Just wall. His hand burned all the way home. That night, he found page 4 already filled in. He would see her face again, the girl he forgot. She would come to him in a photo first, then the voice, then the scream. Jeremy didn't know a her. No girlfriend, no ex. He'd always been a loner. That's how he liked it. At least, that's what he thought. Then he opened the photo album in his closet, the one he hadn't touched in years. On the first page, between 2 pictures of him as a kid, was a photo he had never seen. A girl, maybe 12, dark hair, a yellow raincoat, standing in the background of a playground. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at him. That night, he heard her voice whisper from the bathroom drain. She said his name, and then she screamed. Jeremy didn't sleep. The scream echoed long after it stopped. It wasn't a startled shriek. It was long, raw, and full of grief or rage. Maybe both. He spent the night with every light on, the book shut tight and shoved under his bed. But he knew it was still writing, still waiting. In the morning, he checked the photo again. The girl in the yellow raincoat hadn't moved, of course, but now her eyes were blurred. Faint streaks trailed down the image, like old water damage. But the rest of the photo was perfectly clear. She was crying. Somehow, the photo was crying. His wrist had worsened. The spiral had split open, revealing something like a second iris beneath his skin. It didn't blink, but it was wet, responsive, alive. When he covered it with a bandage, it pulsed like it didn't like the dark. He didn't go outside. Not anymore. At 3:33 p.m., the phone rang. Unknown number. He didn't answer. The answering machine picked up automatically. "Hi, Jeremy," a child's voice said. Female. Sweet. Flat. "I remember the woods. Do you?" Click. He didn't. But when he opened the book, page 5 had written itself. They found her in the reservoir 6 days after she disappeared. The boy said he didn't know her, but her handprint was still on his shoulder. Jeremy ripped the page out, shoved it down the garbage disposal, let the blades grind until nothing remained. The next morning, it was back, neatly bound, same font, same page. And this time, the photo album had changed too. A new image had been added. The same girl, but older, now maybe 15, stood outside the door to his apartment, her hand raised as if mid-knock. Her face was blurred. That night, she knocked for real. 3 times. He didn't answer, just sat on the floor, hands clutched over his ears, the open book beside him. It turned another page on its own. He remembered the woods. He remembered the scream. He just chose to forget, but she never did. The knocking stopped, but the doorknob turned once, slowly. The doorknob stopped turning, but Jeremy didn't move from the floor. He stayed frozen for hours, knees tight to his chest, listening. No footsteps, no breath, Just silence. When he finally stood up, it was nearly dawn. The hallway outside was empty. He knew that meant nothing. He didn't check the book until noon. Page 7 was waiting. The photo would appear where he least expected, in his food, in his drink, in the mirror. She would make sure he saw her, because the story wasn't his alone. He dumped his cereal into the sink. There, floating in the milk, was the photo. Small, glossy, perfectly dry, her face still blurred, her hand raised in that same silent knock. He smashed the mirror in the bathroom. Behind the cracked glass, the reflection still held, but now she stood behind him, just beyond reach, unmoving. Jeremy stopped trying to deny it. The book was alive, not figuratively. It was writing him into something that had already happened, or was still happening. It wasn't telling the future anymore. It was telling the truth. A truth he'd erased. He spent hours online trying to find her. News archives, local missing persons. Nothing. No girl in yellow, no reservoir drowning, no woods. He thought maybe that proved he was going insane, but it didn't help. That night, page 8 appeared. He would dig under the stairs, beneath the 4th step. There, he would find what was left. A lock of hair, a rain-soaked ribbon, and the proof that he wasn't alone in the woods. He didn't want to, but he did. The wood creaked. The crawl space was dry, cold. Under the 4th step, buried in old insulation, he found a rusted tin box. Inside, a wet ribbon, pale yellow, a braid of black hair, stiff with time, and a bracelet, plastic, with faded letters. J plus J. His stomach twisted. His name was Jeremy. Hers had been... The phone rang again. Same number. He picked up. This time her voice was different. Older. Sharper. "You made me wait," she said. Then silence. And in the dead air, he heard himself reply. A recording, maybe. "I'm sorry." The bracelet haunted him. He kept it on the kitchen table, staring at it like it might explain something. J plus J. Jeremy and Julia? Jenny? The name refused to surface, but the guilt was already there. Heavy, familiar, like muscle memory. He tried burning the ribbon. It didn't catch. He dropped the hair down the trash chute. It came back in the bathroom sink. The book now flipped its own pages at night. He heard it whispering as he slept, not in words, but in rhythm, turning, waiting, writing. Page 9 came without a sound. He remembered the truth he had always remembered. He just called it something else. A dream, a lie, a child's confusion. But now the story was ready to end. One would leave, one would stay. He didn't sleep. Instead, he stood in front of the mirror, watching for her. At 3:33 a.m., she appeared. Behind him, in the reflection only, her face no longer blurred. It was familiar, almost his. Not a sister, a twin? But he remembered being alone. Didn't he? She lifted her hand and pressed it to the glass. He did the same. Cold. She whispered, "You chose yourself." And the glass cracked down the middle. His wrist eye opened wide, burning. Then everything around him shifted. The apartment, the walls, the lights, like film skipping in a projector. He was no longer in his home. He stood in the bookstore. Dusty. Empty.
His book sat on the pedestal, open to a new page. The boy walked out of the story, but she stayed. That was the rule. The 9th copy always takes one. He looked up. She stood in the doorway now. Not a ghost, just her. She smiled, and as he reached for the book again, she turned and walked out into the street. Free. He wasn't. The bookstore was silent. No bell rang, no breeze moved through the cracked windows. Jeremy stood motionless beside the pedestal, the open book glowing faintly under the amber light. The page didn't move now. It had stopped writing. Or maybe it was waiting for someone else to read it. He touched the cover. It felt warm. From outside, the sound of footsteps. Then the bell that hadn't worked before, chimed once, sweet and sharp. A man stepped in. Mid-40s, flannel shirt, worn-out jeans, distracted look. The kind of man who wandered into shops like this without knowing why. Jeremy tried to speak, but no sound came. He tried to move, but his legs didn't respond. He realized he wasn't standing anymore. He was sitting, inside the bookstore, behind the counter, watching. The man approached the pedestal. The book sat open to a blank page. He reached out. Jeremy tried to scream. Nothing, not even a breath. The man turned the page. Words appeared.
He shouldn't have touched it, but now it was too late. The 9th copy had a new reader, and the one before him, well, he was part of the story now. The man frowned. Weird, he muttered. Creepy writing. He looked around, didn't see anyone, shrugged, closed the book, and walked toward the door. Jeremy's hand moved on its own. He opened the drawer. Inside was the photo, the girl in yellow, and now a new one, the man in flannel, face blurred, standing in front of the bookstore. The drawer closed itself. The book turned another page. The story never ends. It just turns back around. Outside, the bell rang again. Another reader entered. Inside the glass of the display window, Jeremy's reflection blinked. But he wasn't in the room. He was in the page, and the book smiled without a mouth.